Eventually we'll get going here. Okay, tonight we're going to go back and do one of our beginner lessons on descendancy research. And every time I do this one, I think of Grant Bybee, because Grant's the great lover of descendancy research. And he's the one that really convinced me that descendancy research has a lot of value to it. And so that's what we're going to cover today. And so what we're actually going to cover is we're going to talk about what it means to do descendancy research first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about duplicates, and then about the descendancy view itself and take it apart and show you the parts of it. And then we'll do some demonstrations, which I misspelled, using the descendancy view. I've got several little demonstrations. Okay, so what is descendancy research? Our primary responsibility is to do our ancestors, and we know that. But for a lot of us, we reach a point where it's really almost impossible to get new ancestors, because all the easy ones have been found, and the ones that haven't been found are hiding down a rabbit hole somewhere, and we're having a heck of a time finding them. And so if we want to find names for the temple, we have to turn to the descendancy part of our family. And so when we have a full tree, this is the way we've got to go. And Descendancy View in FamilySearch is one of several different ways to do descendancy research. The question always comes, and you get this from some of your patrons, well, isn't it all done? And so a good example for that is if you pick an ancestor that's back 8 generations, and you presume that the average family had about 5 children that had kids, and they left descendants, and you follow that down 8 generations, you're going to come to close to 500,000 descendants for that one person back 8 generations. And I think there's either 125 or 250 pairs of ancestors that far back, each of them having about 500,000 descendants. So it's physically impossible that all those descendants have been found. And even if they're found, that all of them have had their temple work done. We just haven't done that much temple work to cover the millions and millions and millions of people out there. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to try to help you find your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, and their spouses and their children. This is what descendancy research is. But anytime we talk about finding people to put in tree, we really have to bring up the topic of duplicates. There's just no way around it. There's literally thousands there. I've always thought, they ought to go away, but they don't seem to. I think for every one that we clear up, somebody else puts another one in. And so they just never seem to go away. And so anytime you put a person in, the best way to approach it is to assume that there's a duplicate out there. And as you keep adding information to the person, keep checking for duplicates. In the past, FamilySearch was too generous at first, back in the days of New FamilySearch, New FamilySearch. And they gave you everything that was even remotely possible. And then that caused a lot of problems with a lot of bad merges for people that really weren't related, but the user said, FamilySearch said they're duplicates, I'm going to merge them. So FamilySearch backed off, and they made it a more restrictive environment for what they offer as duplicates. And now we have the opposite problem, where it'll say there's no duplicates, and there really are duplicates out there. And so for a record to come up as a duplicate, it has to really be very similar, and probably a lot more similar than you would consider needed to be as a human being. But then we're talking about a machine right now that's judging things. So the dates and the places need to be alike. And like the year 1840 and the date 7 January 1840 is not a match. They're similar and they'll get partial credit, but they will not get a credit for being a match for the system when it's looking and comparing. Same thing if you say Missouri or you say St. Joseph, Missouri. They're not the same, and so they don't get a full match. And then the relationships need to be alike. And so you get it, what you get is you get situations like this. And the question becomes, are these two duplicates? You know, the one's John Brown, the other one's John Anderson Brown. One guy's born about 1873 in Missouri, and the other guy's born the 3rd of December, 1872 in Monroe, Missouri. The first guy, we have no death date. The second guy, we have a death. The first guy, we've got parents. And the second guy, we've got a spouse, but no parents. Are they duplicates? FamilySearch will not tell you these are possible duplicates. There's no way they will do it because there are so many differences when in fact they are the same person. It's just that some of the stuff was put into one and some of the stuff was put into the other one. And they don't share everything and they don't have the same level of exactness as the other one has. And so these are the kind of problems you have. So as you put the top John Brown in, they're going to say, oh, there's no duplicate here. But if you add his wife, then there'll probably be enough similarity that it'll say, hey, take a look at this other guy. Or if you put in a full birth date for him or a death date, then it might start saying, ooh, we think we found somebody. But at first it's going to say, oh, there's no duplicate. So that's the kind of thing we're working with right now. So our thoughts on duplicates are, the more information you put in a record, the better chance you have of finding the duplicates and being sure you've got the only record for that person. Remember, the bottom line is we don't want to duplicate temple work. So we only want one record for each person. And so adopt that attitude that when you put something in, it's probably a duplicate, even when it says it isn't. And like I said, we want one record. Okay, the Descendancy View, what it shows. Okay, when you go to the pedigree of a person, you're given the 4 options: a landscape, portrait, fan chart, and the Descendancy View, which isn't a pedigree view, but it's an expanded view. And so that's where you find the descendancy. What you want to do is create the ancestry for the person you want this list to begin with, and then switch it over in this drop down under tree to the descendancy that you want. Then there's a section called options. And you want to take a look at that at least the first time you use it to make sure it's got checked what you want. I've highlighted the ones I would recommend. You definitely want to see the temple ordinances. They show you the 3 possible colors. You're going to see record hints. I like to see those because they're our password into, or our passcode into adding names a lot of times. Research suggestions aren't so important to me. Data problems is good because often you can solve the data problem and that makes the person become eligible for temple ordinances. You don't want to show the portraits because then you get like a 2-inch section for each person in your descendancy view and you have to scroll forever to get down through your Descendancy View. So I undo that. And I want to show spouses because I don't want to have to guess, does this person have a spouse or not? And so this way is a way for sure to see who it is and know that that person's there. So I like those 4 checked. And once you check them, they stay that way. And if you want to change them, you have to go back to options and switch them again. But anytime you're working with a patron, the first thing you want to do is go look at what their options are set for. Almost always they have the portraits showing, and you want to get rid of that. Okay, now the colors for temple work. They've got the green, which means they're available to be reserved. And of course, we know there's 2 kinds of greens now. Some are actually reserved and shared by others. Then there's the blue ones. Those are ordinances that are in progress. They've been reserved either by other people or you've reserved them and either shared them or have them for yourself. But those are ordinances that are tied up. You're not going to be, unless they're yours, they're not going to be available to you directly. Because the other people that reserve things and share, those are up under the green. The orange means more information is needed. And those are often very easy to fix. That's one of the things I look for. I look for that in the record hints. And then the gray, you don't see it all. Gray does not show up in the Descendancy View. If a person's work is all done, it's just going to be blank. You're not going to have any temple symbol. Gray normally means that either it's not needed, like in a little child, it only needs to be sealed, or it means that it's been completed, but you're not going to see that in a Descendancy View. So if you don't see anything, just assume there's nothing needed on the Descendancy View. The record hints are record hints, and they are the thing you want to really zero in on, that and the orange temple markers, because those are the things that are the easiest to do. And Grant Bybee will say, all you do is just keep working the record hints and you'll add a bunch of people. It just falls into place. Sooner or later, as you're working those record hints, you're going to start adding new people into tree because those hints will have the new people. Okay, and then the data problems, those are easy to fix too. Oftentimes it's just maybe a typo error or something like that. Somebody's made a bad guess and they put a totally nonsensical date in on somebody and things like that. And so it's really, this can often be fixed too. The thing I like to stay away from when I'm working with new patrons is when it says there's possible duplicates. When you go to look at somebody's temple work and it says underneath it, possible duplicates, those I would just stay away from for the time being, because you and I know it might take us 2 minutes to fix that, or it might take us 5 hours. And so probably the smartest thing to do is avoid the ones where it says possible duplicate. Okay, the green temples again, in case we're not aware, the regular looking temples are traditional green temple. That means that name has not been reserved by anybody and it is available. You can reserve it and you'll get 2 years once the clock starts rolling to get the work done. And you can extend that 2 years by doing some of the work. If you do the baptisms on it, they'll add another year to the length of time you can have it. That's the way the system works. The other type of temple has that little clock on it. And those are the ones that are actually reserved by somebody else, but they've been shared with the temple. And you're welcome to grab them. And there are millions of these. The only restriction you have is you can only have them for 90 days. and you can't share them with the temple. You have to do them yourself. So you don't grab them to share them. They're already shared. If you don't do them within 90 days, they go back to the person that originally reserved them and shared them with the temple. Okay. Now, all the shared with the temple are now green. Just want to remind you of that. And when you see the little clock and you pull it up, you'll see sometimes a little message that will say these ordinances were shared with the temple. You may reserve them and then have 90 days to complete them. You also may get a message that says that some of these are shared and some aren't, and you can only grab the shared ones. Like I just went in today and I shared a couple of sealing to spouses with the temple. But the other ordinances for the person are open for the public to grab. And so you may see a mixture of them. You may find somewhere the sealing to parents is available for reserving because it was shared, but the person's doing all the individual things up through endowment. So you can only grab what you can grab, only the things that were actually shared. Okay, and then always remember, just because somebody's green in that list, that doesn't mean that the name is accurate, that the work is good, that there isn't a hidden duplicate. It needs to be checked. If you're really doing your due diligence, you just don't run in there, grab them and keep running with them. You stop and you do a little vetting before you go on and find somebody else, because you want to make sure that it's based on good research. Okay, final suggestions. Take advantage of those icons. That's why they're there. Make sure you've got showing what you want. Look for people that show either no spouse and they have a long lifespan, or maybe they show a spouse and they have no children, or maybe only one child. These are often your golden people that you can work at and add a lot of information. Of course, not everybody married, not everybody had a large family, but the odds are they did. Open people you want to see in another window. Now you can just click on them in the Descendancy View and it covers up the Descendancy View and brings that person up. And if you're careful and you hit the back button just the right number of times, you'll get back to that Descendancy View. I find it a lot easier to click on the person, their little card comes up, then I put my mouse over person and do a right click and say open in another tab. And then that way the Descendancy View always sits there. Work the hints because it'll be easy to do. And then the last thing, go through this descendant view in some sequence. It's a long list of names. You start at the top and work at to the bottom, or start at the bottom and work to the top. Now I'll tell you Bob's secret. Bob goes to the bottom because 90% of the people go to the top. And I'm going to go to the bottom because it takes time to get down there. The people that start at the top never make it to the bottom. And so I'm convinced, and it usually works pretty good, that I can find a lot of stuff if I go to the bottom of the list and start working up the list. So that's just my suggestion. You'll see that tonight. Okay. Let's see some examples. I've got several different examples here. And this first one, I'm going to say that when you're working with somebody else, I would go to the helper resources to their tree and start digging around in the tree. And, we've talked about this, it's been several months now, about looking for that sweet spot to start, which is about 2 generations prior to the time they would have joined the church, if they joined the church in the 1830s. So back to the 1740, 1760 range is usually where I like to start. That's far enough back that I'm quite a ways back, but usually trees are fairly accurate to that point. And so if you don't go too far back, if you keep going, you're going to get into trouble. Going back that far, you're fairly safe. Now, this happens to be my tree. And I know Henrietta Neidig. Neidig's the way the name was anglicized when they came to America. They're Germans from Germany, the Pennsylvania Dutch. And so I decided I'd go to Henrietta because she was born in 1761. And when I got there, I decided, you know, Henrietta's my ancestor, and I know I've done a lot of work on her descendants. Henrietta's right here. She's child number 3. So I said, I haven't never done anything with her sister, Anna Christiana, who married a Kramer. And she had a lot of kids. So this will be a nice big descendancy. And so I decided, oh, I'm going to start over there instead. And so I went to Anna and I went and made her pedigree and then changed it to descendancy. And so here's Anna Christiana Neidig and Philip Kramer at the top. I set the number of generations for 4, which is the max that the system will give me. And so it generated a great big long list. And like I've said, I went all the way down to the bottom. And that doesn't mean you're going to find people that are way back in time necessarily. In fact, one of the people that it brings up, I believe, is her youngest daughter, Anna Margaret Kramer. So, I mean, this is not very far off of the main line. Okay, so I didn't worry about Anna, even though she lived to be 40-something. She had no spouse showing. I didn't see any hints. I didn't see anything for her. What stood out right away was Magdalena, her sister, and her husband, Alexander Cochrane, because they both had these orange temples. So I said, okay, let's go there. So we're going to look at Magdalena and Alexander. And so when I went and looked at them, the first thing I found out was right away, it said, oh, there's possible duplicates. So I had to do a little merging right away. And when I got through merging, I ended up with this little family of Alexander and Magdalena, and now I have a child, Thomas Beale Cochrane. So I now have a child that wasn't there in the original pedigree. So I didn't add much from doing this merge, but now there's no more definite merges around. So I got curious and thought, well, I wonder if Ancestry can give me any hints. I like to look there. I won't copy stuff out of there, but I'll go look there to see if it gives me some ideas. And so when I went over there, sure enough, there's a family in there for Alexander and his wife, Mary or Molly Kramer or Kramer. Kramer, I've found over 20 different spellings for Kramer. It's one of my ancestral lines, and Kramer's one of them. Now, I know this is the right family because this over in FamilySearch has Thomas Beale, and here's Thomas Beale. Okay. Notice they also have a daughter named Elizabeth Ann down here with no dates. Okay, so I know I'm on the right track, and I see that the Ancestry says there are 7 kids. So I should be able to find some. So I look at the father, and he's got a hint. Ohio deaths. Well, it's not his death. Whoops. It's for a daughter, Elizabeth A. Lees. Remember, he had a daughter, Elizabeth Ann Kramer. Well, she marries a Lees, and this gives us her birth date, full death date, that she was born in Ohio, or died in Ohio, born in Maryland, and it has her husband's name on down below there. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to source this. And so as I went in sourcing it, the father and the mother, of course, are in tree. They were easy to source. The daughter shows up is not in tree, of course, because she wasn't there in the family. So I had to click add. And when I clicked add, it said there was no possible duplicates. So it filled it in with the full birth date, the full death date, the place of death, place of birth. Really nice setup for me. So I created a new person, and then I sourced her. And then I went and looked at her record, and now it suddenly says, oh, there's a duplicate. I'm really surprised that it didn't pick it up when I created her, but it was sitting there on her person page when I got there. For Elizabeth A. Cochran, it's got the same birth and death information, and that one has the spouse. So I guess because the second one had the spouse, and the spouse, I guess, wasn't mentioned on the death certificate. I thought it was, must not have been. That somehow caused it not to show up as a duplicate when I created Elizabeth. So whatever reason, we had to go through and do a merge for her. And so after the merge, I get a couple of kids. I get 3 kids out of the deal. She's got her husband now, Samuel, and 3 children. Those were in the duplicate record. And after the merge, Elizabeth and James, even though they were already in tree before I started, they still had no work done on them. Their son, William, needed all his work. Mary had everything done except sealing to parents, and Sarah was totally done. So somebody had been working from the bottom up and had done a couple of the kids, probably their spouse's family, and didn't know what to do with the kids, with this spouse, because they didn't know the Lee's side of the family. And so I've got work for 4 people from doing that simple check of those orange tabs on the Descendancy View. Okay, so here's another example for adding a hint. In another Descendancy View, I had a Nancy Hufford, and she showed that she had a hint. Nancy's an orange icon because right now all she's got is a name. No birth, no death, anything. This census, 1880 census, is for the family of Noah Bunnell and his wife Margaret, her adoptive parents. She's listed as adoptive child. That's why her last name isn't Bunnell, because she was born a Hufford, which is interesting. So after sourcing her, she's all green now, ready to go. I should do more sources and find more information, but at this point, she is available for temple work just by attaching that hint. That's why I say it's so easy to get to the point of getting people turned green. All you really need to do is play with those hints for a little bit. Okay, name shared with the temple. Now here's an example that when I pulled this one up for Charlie Nail, it said that one or more of these ordinances were shared with the temple, and you can reserve them. It's warning me that they might all be, but in this case, there's only the one, and it wasn't shared. So if I wanted to grab that sealing to spouse, I'd be able to do it and have the 2 years. But that is a possibility, and so they do have that warning. That's the only one I could find where I could actually show the warning message. Okay, adding someone with a hint. So this time we're working on Abraham L. Mullum. And you notice him here. These other people have those little arrows. That means they've got a spouse, at least a spouse and possibly children. Abraham has nothing. That means he's in tree right now with no spouse. Well, that's interesting since Abe Mullum appears to have a marriage record. an Ohio County marriage. So that's kind of an almost no-brainer if I can somehow link him in. So I pull it up, and it says that there's a marriage in Wyandotte County in 1889 for him. He's 21 years old, so he's born about 1868, which would be okay because the child above him was 1863. The one below him is 1869, so 1868's in between. And he's 21 years of age. And the county that you can't see on here, but if you go to the family, the county was in Wyandotte County. And so the odds of more than one Abraham or Abe Millams, pretty slim. And so this is him. And by doing this record, I'm able to pull in a spouse, Emma Taylor. But this time I sourced Abe, he's done, he's green. When I go to add Emma, there's already two of her there. One of them, and this is a good example of why they're not merged. One of them is Emma with a birth of January of 1870, probably from the 1900 census, and a spouse, Abe, born 1863, which is off, but that's all right. And the other one is probably a much more complete record, Emma Alice Taylor, 4th of January, 1870. So it's got a full date, but the month and year are the same. She has a death. She has a spouse, Millam. They don't even know who his full name is, and her parents. See, this is why they're not merged yet, because they don't really have enough in common for them, for the system to want to say for sure. But we can look at it and say, yeah, they're the same. So I've picked one of them. I picked the one that's on the bottom because it's got the most data, and matched it with the record that I'm sourcing. And then I made a copy of the ID for the top gal and then merged them together. After several merges, that was just the first of several things I had to do. Abe's family ended up having 3 children. And of the 5 people, the husband, the wife, and the 3 kids, there's green boxes showing the missing ordinances for 4 of the 5 people. Most of them are sealings. Abe needed sealing to spouse. His wife needed her endowment, sealing to parents and sealing to spouse. The first child is sealing to parents, and the bottom child, endowment, sealing to parents. But there were work to be done on 4 of the 5 people. And it just took a few merges in this case. Okay, another example. We've got Nora Nina Zoll up here. And again, she's showing no connection, just herself, no spouse, but she lived to be 83. And so those are the people I start looking at to see what's going on. And so Find a Grave happened to have a hint that there's a husband. And so I went looking, and sure enough, in sources under Indiana marriages, because this is where they were when she was young, I found a 1919 marriage to a Thomas Raymond Black. Her parents are Ed Zoll and Alice Babcock, and that's the name of her parents, and up above, farther up on the list. And so I was able to put this family together thanks to the hint that said, oh, there's a husband. Let's see, I looked at the records and the source came up. It looks like it's is source, the tree symbol, but the husband was never sourced. Oh, okay. When I looked at this record, you see the little tree symbol here. That's because something's been sourced. They sourced Nora, but they never sourced her husband. And it was sitting right there in the record. So when I sourced him, I created a new record for him. And then there was also a daughter that was born before they were married, but she's connected to them, and they all needed temple work. Okay, and then this morning, just for the fun, I was sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to get my descendancy juices going. So I went to my ancestor, Joseph Green and Margaret Abbott, and did a descendancy on them. Went to the bottom again. This is the very bottom of the list. And I pulled up the final family in the group in that list, Abbott, Green, and Margaret Abbott. I like that because it's an odd name, Abbott Green. They don't show anything over here. Their work's done, obviously. There's no hints. There's no problems or any of those things, but there's no kids. And so what you're seeing right here are 7 people. I want to remember that. There's one temple, there's one green temple here, and there's 3 cautions. Okay, well, the first 3 people above here were a mess. They didn't belong where they were at. They were in wrong places. They belonged in different places. And so I had to get all that fixed up. I did that after I did a bunch of other research. But my main focus is this family here. I just went to them and said, okay, let's just do a little descendancy research. Before lunch, this is what I ended up with. And this is only part of the descent. There's a bunch of families here. You can see 4 of them right there that I did not expand because then the list would get too long. Altogether, there are now 47 people in this list. It's an addition of 40 people. Now, not all of them are new in tree. I'd say at least 25 of them are. A few of them came in because they were in trees. The child, maybe like George W. Walls, was in tree with a spouse and a couple of kids, but they didn't have his parents, so he wasn't connected in. So I was able to bring a couple of families in. Anyway, ended up with 28 green temples. That's an addition of 27 green temples. And only 2 of these have any prior reservations. There's 2 of them that can be shared, you know, that you can grab and have 90 days. And all the rest of them are new. So I reserved a few that I wanted, and I left the rest green for the family to grab. That's how easy this is. So, questions? I will stop sharing. I just want to say next time, I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk about the new family groups on FamilySearch, and also talk about the card catalog.